Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments. Today, we're discussing a critical but often uncomfortable topic, and this is identifying and addressing leadership failure at the current level.
That's right, Stacey. We're going to explore how to recognize when leaders are struggling at their current level of responsibility, and more importantly, what to do about it.
Yeah, this is really just a sensitive subject because one that's critical for organizations and your individual growth. But let's start defining by what we mean by leadership failure at the current level, Tracy Ann.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So, in this context, we're talking about leaders who were successful at previous levels but are now struggling to meet the demands of their current position. So it's not about catastrophic failures, but rather a consistent inability to perform effectively at the expected level that they're in.
Yeah, and that's really an important distinction. So Tracy Ann, can you give me some examples of what this might look like?
Yeah, sure. So it could be a team leader who's excelled at an individual contributor level, but now is struggling to delegate effectively, for example. Or it could be a middle manager who can't adapt to the strategic thinking required at a higher level. It could even be a C suite executive who's unable to navigate the complexities of the enterprise wide decision making.
Yeah, I love those examples and they're spot on. And when we think about what does it mean with failing at your current level? Now, I'm curious, why do you think it's so challenging to identify these situations?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. I mean, first off, there's often a reluctance to admit that someone was previously successful is now struggling, right? Because we always think, oh, once, once a success, always a success, right? There's also the Peter principle at play. The idea that people are promoted to their level of incompetence.
Yeah, I love that. We probably should explain the Peter Principle a little bit just in more detail in case people are not sure what that is. So, the Peter Principle was proposed by Dr. Lawrence J. Peter in 1969, and it states that in a hierarchy, employees tend to rise to their level of incompetence. So you think about that, right? We struggle so hard, get promoted, get promoted, get promoted, and he's saying you get promoted to the position that doesn't really work. So people are promoted based on their performance in their current role rather than their ability to perform in the role that they're being promoted in. So eventually you reach a position where you're no longer competent, and that's where they remain.
Yeah, that's right, Stacey. So, organizations and leaders often ask, what can they do to prevent this from happening? All right. So, some strategies to mitigate through the PETA principle include skill based promotions. So, you evaluate the candidates based on the skills required for the new role, not just their performance in the current position. The second one is leadership development programs. You've got to provide training and mentoring to actually prepare individuals for higher level roles that they're being promoted to before they're promoted. The third one is these, what we call these trial periods. So implement probationary periods for new leadership positions to ensure that they're actually a good fit. The fourth one is lateral moves. So in this case, we're encouraging horizontal career moves to broaden skills and experience before vertical promotions. And we see a lot of companies today use that. And then the last one is this regular feedback. Implement continuous feedback systems to identify and address challenges early. These are all five really good examples of things leaders can do today.
Yeah, I really love those examples. And I've actually tried a couple of those in my leadership and working with potentially promoting others. But I'd love to talk about when you think about it within yourself. So, if you're a leader and you start recognizing that maybe you're struggling and what to do, and maybe you're not at the level that is the best for you to succeed, which is really hard to admit, first of all, right? But if you start recognizing, what steps do you think that they should take?
Yeah, it's a great, Stacy, this is a topic all in itself, I got to tell you. I mean, it's a crucial point, and it's something that you and I do a lot of coaching on and a lot of speaking on, okay? Which is this topic of self-awareness. So self-awareness for all of us is a real valuable trait in leaders, right? If a leader identifies that they're struggling at that current level, here are just some steps, that I would take. For example, with some of my, the individuals that I'm coaching, and I know you've done this as well. So the first one is honest self-assessment. Identify specific areas where they're falling short and the skills that they need to develop. Seed feedback. Ask for honest input from peers, superiors, direct reports. I mean, I've done my own 360s, and don't go to the people that, like you, go to the people that you might be having challenges with, for example, right? Find a mentor, seek guidance from someone who has successfully navigated similar challenges. Invest in learning. We all need to be continuous learners. Pursue that relevant training, the education, or the coaching to really address those skill gaps. And then open communication, candid discussion with your superior about their challenges and desire to improve. And then also consider alternatives. If it's really if that mismatch persists, be open to having, a lateral move or even stepping back to a role that better fits your skill set and your interests. And then I would say the last one is this, setting realistic goals for yourself. Develop a personal improvement plan with measurable objectives and timelines.
Yeah, I love those. And let's just like pause for a minute, because those are really hard on the ego. It's hard on you as career aspirations, and you've worked so hard to get to that level that you're at, and then recognizing maybe this isn't working for me, but you don't want to admit that to yourself. So I think you're thinking about those things. And first, as Tracy Ann talked about, understanding the skills and the learning and taking the opportunity to say, I need some help here, whether it's a mentor, whether it's getting a coach, whether it's actual skills development. Definitely try those things. But if those things aren't working, saying, you know what, it may be best for me to step back and go to a different role that I can be more successful in. Very difficult to say, but so much better for your career. And
Yeah.
as if you're a leader, and you see this in one of your leaders, having that conversation early and supporting them through that, making sure that they're successful. Tracy, and we always talk about our core principles, right? And mine is that everyone can be successful in the right role. So making sure that you're in your right role is really, really important. So I love those suggestions that you have. And we talk about
Yeah.
that courage to admit that they're struggling, right? But
Yeah.
it's ultimately better for everyone that's involved when you do this.
No question. And it's also important to remember that recognizing and addressing the issue, and I want everyone to hear this, it's a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. Okay. As leaders, we need to be humble and aware, and we need to recognize what is the best thing to do for everyone around us as well as the organization. And many successful leaders have faced similar challenges and have grown from that experience.
Yeah, and just because nobody's saying anything to you doesn't mean it's not noticed. So don't think you're fooling anybody. If
That's
you're feeling it and seeing it, others are too. And the faster that you bring it up, talk about it with your leadership, get the support that you need, the stronger you are as an individual and as a professional. So I think that's a really great point. And I
Yeah.
imagine there's also fear, right, of confronting these issues, both from the leader's perspective and also those around them. So you have to be able to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one wants to be the bearer of bad news, okay? Especially when it's your career. But avoiding the issue, can lead to far worse outcomes for everyone involved.
So, what do you think some of the signs are that a leader might be failing that they could look at when they're at their current level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, some of the common indicators that you can think of is, consistently missing performance targets or their deadlines, right? Their inability to develop and execute strategies appropriate for that level, poor team morale or high turnover among direct reports, reverting to tasks from their previous role instead of focusing on current responsibilities. Another one is difficulty making decisions or constantly second guessing themselves. And then I would also say one of the ones we see a lot of is this inability to effectively communicate with higher level stakeholders.
Yeah. Those are really good, and when we talk about, these helpful indicators and signs of it, but we could get confused of, is it a temporary situation? Is it situational with just that certain topic or that time period? Or is it truly an issue between your current role and a genuine mismatch? So, what do you think are some ideas around that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, it's important to look for patterns over time rather than isolated incidents. When you think about consistency as a key factor, right? Also, consider whether the issues are specifically related. Excuse me. I'm going to start that again. Also, consider whether the issues are specifically related to the demands of the current role as opposed to personal or external factors. That's really important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And once we've identified that a leader is truly struggling at their current level, what are your thoughts on what should be done? We talked about them speaking up, but we know that's hard. So, what do you think are some other ideas?
Look, the first step is always to have an honest, open conversation with your leader. It starts there. This should be done by the direct supervisor or someone from HR, depending on the organizational structure.
Yeah, I really love that, and it's got to be difficult to be able to bring that up because you want your leaders to succeed as well. You may have been the one that promoted them, thinking that they could do this. So that's not going to be easy, and it sounds like a really difficult conversation. You know, Tracy Ann, why don't you give some tips on how a leader might approach that?
Yeah, I think it's really crucial to approach the conversation first and foremost with empathy. Uh, and also with this focus on growth. You have to start by acknowledging the leader's past successes, the contributions that they've had, making sure that they know that you value and respect them, and then clearly articulating what those gaps are between current performance expectations. Definitely always got to use very specific examples and data where possible, because that would be the first question I would ask is, well, give me an example, for example, right? So just being able to really take notes and make sure that you're giving them the data so that they can think about that, I think is really key.
Yeah, and I would add that it's got to be really important to make sure you're listening to the leader's perspective as well. You need to give that information, but then you need to pause. And as we say, we have two ears and one mouth, and use those two ears for a little while and understand where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, always ask them for a self assessment, and any challenges that they've identified. They might be aware of issues and have some insights into the root causes. A very simple ask is, how do you think you're doing? How do you think it's going?
Yeah, that's really important. So, okay. So, I'm a leader. I recognize this with one of my other leaders. I sit down, I have this conversation with them. I get their perspective as well. So now it's out in the open. What do you suggest are next steps?
Well, the first thing is they have to put an action plan together. Okay. And this could involve several approaches. First thing is a targeted skill development program. So you've got to identify those specific skills that that leader needs to acquire or to improve, provide training, provide coaching. You may even want to get them an external coach at this point in time if you feel that that is worthwhile and it's going to really make a difference. The second one would be mentorship, right? Pair them with a more experienced mentor who has successfully navigated similar transitions. Adjust responsibilities, just temporary, really. You can just say, hey, I'm going to just modify your responsibilities for a short period of time. It just allows them to focus on developing critical skills, and then put together a performance improvement plan. Like, set clear, measurable goals with specific timelines for that improvement.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second because performance improvement plans, a lot of times when you hear those words, people
Hmm.
just sink in,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And they shut down. And I think it's so important if you do move to that point, that the whole point of that is really to help the person succeed. And I have personally seen many professionals turn it around once you actually do these plans because what we're finding is sometimes the leader's not as clear as the expectations
Mm.
or they don't understand that they need some training and some skills. And when you put these plans together, it is extremely clear what is expected, by when is it expected, and it gives that leader that's receiving the plan to understand, okay, I can do this, but I need help here, right? So
Yeah.
it gives them that opportunity to do that. But let's say we do all this and these interventions don't work. What do we do then?
Well, I think at that point, that's when, the organization is facing some tough decisions, right? And I always think about it in sort of these three buckets. One, there's a reassignment. You're moving that leader to a role that's better matched for them based on their current skills and abilities. Second one is creating a new role, right? If the leader has got valuable skills, but they don't fit that current role, then sometimes a new position can be created to leverage the skills that they do have. And then the outplacement. In some cases, the best option for both the individual and the organization might be to part ways, ideally with, supporting them for finding a new position elsewhere.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And, you might get to a point that there is a difficult outcome, right? But I think the point is stand up, raise your hand. I have actually moved many leaders in different positions, whether it's a different team they lead, whether it's a step down, so they can be successful. So I like how you talk about repositioning if you can. Now, unfortunately, sometimes there is not another position available where they would be best successful, and you need to make some other decisions with that. But what can organizations do to prevent these situations from occurring? We talked about how to prepare and some things to do before you promote them. But let's say you still promoted them and now you're here. So, what do you think organizations can do?
Look, I mean, first of all, prevention is definitely ideal, right? Because no one wants to have to deal with this kind of situation.
Right.
So the first thing is more rigorous success planning and leadership development programs. I know sometimes it's really hard to fit this in with the day to day jobs, but taking the time out to plan for your organization, for your department, is really important. Clearer communication of expectations, clarity is the key to success, right? If people know what to expect, they understand how to be successful. That is what is really important because then there's no gray area. Regular feedback, performance discussions, not just annual reviews, but it could be as simple if someone is on a call, there's a certain communication breakdown, calling them straight afterwards, having that conversation, providing support, providing resources during those role transitions, and then creating a culture where it's okay to admit struggles and ask for help. Because that's the biggest thing we find, Stacey, is people are scared to speak up.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you need to make it safe. I've been in organizations where people switch all the time roles. They step up, they step down. And so it's really safe, and people feel that comfort that they can come to someone and they can say, I don't think this is working for me, right?
Yeah.
Very difficult to say, but the fact that they can say it to someone else is what's important. So I totally agree with the culture. And all of these pieces that we're talking about, I hear communicate, 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 which we're like hitting home on all my core principles today, because that is what it's about. It's setting those clear expectations. And when we talk about leaders and promoting them, because let's get real for a minute. When you're the one that promotes that individual, it's emotional. You
Of
want that
course.
person to succeed, right? And so
Yeah.
you have to remove that emotion and you have to recognize that, look, if you promoted that person and they're not in the right role, you need to attack it. You need to work with them. You need to look at yourself and say, did I set the right clear expectations? Am I helping this person succeed in their new role? Because sometimes you make assumptions that, okay, they're in this role so they can do it, right? That's why I promoted
Yeah.
them. And sometimes it's on the leader of being able to do that. And then I think looking at yourself, you're like, oh, I worked so hard to get to this promotion and now I'm here. Sweet, I'm here, right? So what do I do now? I just know what to do.
Yeah.
No, you don't. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So to be able
Yeah.
to ask for that help is really, really hard. Yeah, but
Yeah.
communicate, communicate, communicate is what I hear through this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, transparency and honest dialogue, we know in day-to-day workforce can really prevent many issues from escalating. And more importantly, it really creates the right environment where leaders feel supported in their growth.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. All right, we are getting close on time, but any final thoughts, Tracy Ann, or advice for organizations dealing with this issue?
Yeah, I just say, remember that leadership failure at a current level doesn't negate past successes or future potential. It's often a matter of fit. So rather than, overall capability, right? Approaching the situation with empathy, focusing on the growth, and being willing to make tough decisions when necessary. That's what really leads to a better outcome for both the individual and the organization.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I think it's great. And it really reinforces the idea that leadership development is an ongoing process, which you and I are near and dear to and truly wholeheartedly believe in is continuous learning. So it's
Yeah,
really, really important. And it's not a destination, it's part of the journey.
that's right. Yeah. And, by addressing these issues proactively, organizations can create strong leadership pipeline and their teams are more resilient.
Yeah, love it. Love it. All right. I have enjoyed this discussion. I think it's been insightful. Hopefully, we've helped our listeners with identifying some different areas and addressing how you may not be performing at your current level. Are you caught in the Peter Principle, or have you promoted someone or received someone that's been promoted that's caught in the Peter Principle, and make sure that you do something about it?
Yeah, great discussion, Stacey. Love it. And just to our listeners, thanks for joining us. Remember addressing leadership challenges head on, though difficult, it's crucial for long term success.
And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way. They may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at Tracy_Ann Palmer.
And Stacy Castor _. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner, waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacy Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
This is Tracy Ann Palmer, and be the change you wish to see in the world.